Over the past 30 years, people in my professional and personal life have told me I've been like a mother to them. I've had countless conversations, helped people navigate through challenging moments, and just been there for tough times. So I thought, why not make a space for that? A place where anyone who needs that mama energy can drop in. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed professional. I'm just Mama Mary, and my mic is on. So I've been perusing on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, some YouTube to kind of get an idea of what things people need to know to be good adults or to feel happy as an adult. And the number one thing that has been really hot right now are red flags. How do I know it's a red flag? How do I know it's a green flag? There's a lot of reference to that, but nobody talks about what's beneath that situation. So a red flag is anything that crosses your boundaries, really. Yeah, there could be an orange flag that turns into a red flag, or there's a miscommunication and someone didn't mean that way. So I'd like to talk about a few things. I'd first like to talk about what your boundaries are, because that's more important than the flags. You need to first know what lines should or should not be crossed. So, to establish a boundary, you need to know what your beliefs are. And if you're a teen or in your 20s, sometimes you don't fully know that yet. And your belief system can change over time. So, first, think about what you have learned growing up. You do pull a lot from your parents and growing up, what you've seen and not seen. Sometimes you learn the opposite of what you've seen with your parents and determine, I don't want to be like that. Or you've had a really solid foundation and you know very strongly what you believe in. And that could go for anywhere from your religious beliefs, your personal physical boundaries, which is including intimacy or just friendships, what you're okay and not okay with people being invasive with. So there's a lot that goes into that determination. So I will tell you this first. Look at your foundation, um, and think of yourself as your home, your body as your home, and what are the lines? How do I protect? What's the fence around my home? So for me personally, I'm not I'm a very loving person with those who are close to me, but I'm not a big hugger of strangers. When I meet someone, I'll shake their hand or give them the side hug, but I'm not big on the big hug and constantly touching people. I don't like to be touched for whatever reason. Growing up, my family was very affectionate, but I'm just a little distant, and I learned that about myself over the years. So, a boundary for me is I don't like people in my personal space. There used to be jokes about Mary has a personal bubble. It's about 3 feet. Now, there are people that can come into the bubble, like my husband, my pets, my children, people that I love very deeply, but they have respected that boundary before they entered it. And that's developed a trust. So that's a boundary for me. Um, Loyalty, so things like cheating, whether that be financial, emotional, or physically cheating on you as a partner in your life, that you have to determine, where's that line at. So once you've established, okay, these are my boundaries right now, this is where the line is for me, then you need to communicate those boundaries to the person or people you're involved with. I had a friend once who I didn't realize she was crossing a boundary, and I had to have a conversation of, "Hey, you're showing up uh, in places I'm not comfortable. You haven't been invited to. That bothers me. Or you text me after a certain hour, and I'm already to bed. I have do not disturb on, but I don't like waking up to a barrage of texts. So please don't text me after this time unless it's an emergency. If there is an emergency, you can also call me." So I established a boundary with that person and said, "Hey, don't do this." Then once you've established and communicated your boundaries, that's when you can start determining what's a red flag and what's a green flag. So someone who crosses your boundary, if it hasn't been clearly communicated, that would be what I would call an orange flag. That's somebody who they crossed the boundary, but maybe they didn't fully understand. So it's okay to clarify your boundary with a person. Now, there are some hard boundaries that could be crossed once. I do not condone violence of any type. A person should not hit another person. Um, yes, you should defend yourself if you're attacked, but to be the attackee, right? My dad used to tell me, don't start any fights. But if you're in one, he did teach us how to finish it. Very boomer type of thing to say. However, I don't like to see violence. I don't condone violence. I think that words should be used and people should calm down. It's okay to walk away and cool off. But if someone came up and smacked me for no reason or hit me out of anger, that's a deal breaker for me. That's a red flag I won't tolerate. No more conversation. End of story. And I'm really clear with that boundary, which people think that should make be like common sense, but it's not always common sense. So again, that boundary communicated. I don't I don't like violence, so stop it. And then if someone hits you, that's it. That they've crossed the line, that's a red flag. Um, some boundaries are a little more subtle, or over time, your boundaries might change. When I was pregnant, I didn't like people just walking up and touching my belly. It'd be different if I was comfortable enough and I invited them to touch my belly, but there are people that will just run up to you and start grabbing your belly. Didn't like that. I got really good at blocking people. And then people around me would block as well. So I had my little circle that was protective over me. And I would, if I could, I would say, hey, I don't like to be touched, right? And if someone respected that boundary or was really close to me, uh, I would be like, oh, hey, he's moving now. Do you want to feel? That's different. That's inviting them to feel your belly, but just walking up and grabbing me, not cool. So the root of a red flag is crossing a boundary and severely crossing that boundary, or if it's kind of a light boundary, having a conversation and then they cross it again, end of story. The last part about red flags and boundaries I wanted to talk about is when it is okay to cut someone off or put them on low contact, or do what's called gray rocking. Gray rocking is when you're pretty much putting them on an information diet. You're keeping things at a distance. So it's kind of part of being in low contact with someone. Um, conversations should be had first. Um, and it's totally okay to say, hey, I don't like this, right? I don't like when you showed up at something that I posted about, you weren't invited to, and you showed up and inserted yourself into the situation. That's not cool. Um, if it happens again, XYZ will happen. So if it happens again, we're not friends anymore. If it happens again, I'm not talking to you. If it happens again, I'm moving out. Whatever that scenario is, you have to follow through. So having very healthy boundaries will prevent you from getting in these red flag situations. And it is sad. Sometimes you have to cut someone out of your life that maybe enriched your life in a way, or maybe you have a very small circle. But I will leave you with this. Set your boundaries or figure them out. Like literally sit down and think, what are my boundaries? What are my personal boundaries? How do I feel about my freedom? How do I feel about loyalty? How do I feel about my independence or integrity? Right? Um, write down what those are, determine your beliefs, set your boundaries, and then communicate them. I think sometimes that's the most critical part. And then if someone is approaching a boundary or maybe crosses one in part or potentially misunderstanding, that's when you give your warning. But it's totally okay to protect yourself. It's just like being on an airplane. You can't help someone else um, until you've helped yourself. And it's not selfish to have a boundary. It is not inappropriate. The whole we're family excuse, all of that, that's all a no go. You are your own person. You have your own personal belief system and strengths. You have your own personal boundaries, and people should respect that if communicated. And if not, your circle gets a little smaller, but your circle is trusted. So leave your comments and thoughts on it. Maybe list what one of your boundaries is, or share a story of when a boundary was crossed, and how you dealt with that. And maybe you got lucky and someone just needed to know. So share that information in a comment, or ask a question. Is this a red flag? Is that a red flag? And I will answer as best as I can.